Visual, a burning torch drops in slow motion onto palace marble. Cut to shadows of a disfigured man walking alone across a stormy cliffside. Narration. Imagine being born into one of the most powerful empires in the world. Now imagine losing everything: your throne, your face, and your name, only to return with vengeance so terrifying it scorched an empire's soul. This isn't fiction. This is the true harrowing tale of Justinian II, a man whose legacy was so feared, so despised, that history turned him into a monster. Some said he consorted with horses, but was that truth or political assassination through rumor? Today we're diving deep into the rise and ruin of a ruler once seen as destined by God, until betrayal, mutilation, and vengeance turned his life into one of the most twisted sagas in Byzantine history. Chapter 1. Born for Glory. Narration. Justinian II entered history in 669 AD into a family already crowned with imperial authority. His grandfather Constantine IV had defended Constantinople from the First Arab Siege. His father, too, was a stabilizing ruler. Naming their child Justinian wasn't a coincidence. It was an attempt to channel the glory of Emperor Justinian II, the lawgiver and reconstructor of the Roman dream. From a young age, Justinian was no ordinary prince. He was taught not only to govern, but to embody divine rulership. He learned theology as if his soul depended on it, studied military tactics with real generals, and trained in diplomacy while still a boy. The empire had high hopes. Chapter 2. A Throne in Unsteady Hands. Narration. By 16, his father was dead. Justinian II, barely a man, wore the purple robes. The empire he inherited stretched from the Adriatic to Syria, but it was under pressure from all sides. The Umayyads in the east, Slavic tribes in the Balkans, and internal court factions constantly maneuvering. Initially, the young emperor showed promise. He led successful military campaigns. He minted new coins that stabilized the currency. He even convened a theological council, the Quinisex Council, in 692, trying to unify the church's doctrine. To outsiders, he appeared a new Justinian III, but this was a fragile mask. Chapter 3. Beneath the Golden Mask. Paranoia and cruelty. Narration power, as we know, corrupts. But for Justinian, it did something worse. It consumed him. Historical accounts begin to turn ominous. Instead of relying on experienced generals and scholars, he promoted untested sycophants. Among them was a eunuch named Stephanos, described by some sources as a Persian with an appetite for cruelty that made even hardened soldiers flinch. Real-life example. In one infamous episode, a nobleman criticized the emperor during a banquet. Instead of debate, Justinian had him dragged outside and castrated. The mutilated man's genitals were presented to his wife on a silver tray. Such scenes weren't just rumor, they were warnings etched in the memories of those who dared challenge him. Justinian ruled with divine justification in his mind and terror in his heart. Chapter 4. Persecution, Pagans, and a City on Edge. Narration. Like many rulers eager to prove religious loyalty, Justinian intensified Christian persecution of any group outside official doctrine. Pagans were hunted, heretics burned alive, and entire villages razed under accusations of sorcery or apostasy. The fear spread not only among the aristocrats, but also the commoners. Taxes were increased to fund military campaigns and church projects. Dissenters vanished. Torture became spectacle. In modern terms, we'd call this a theological police state. Real-world reflection. Think of any modern regime where religious purity and authoritarianism collide. The suppression looks eerily familiar, whether in the Inquisition or extremist purges in the 20th century. Chapter 5. The Revolt That Changed Everything. Narration. By 695 AD, the empire teetered on the edge. The people had enough. A general named Leontius, once loyal, now rebelled. Strangely, when he stormed the palace, the guards simply opened the gates. Not out of strategy, but fatigue. Tyranny had drained their loyalty. Justinian was found in his bedchamber, reportedly still in his nightclothes. There would be no mercy. He was dragged into the main square of Constantinople. There, in front of a crowd that once cheered his victories, his enemies performed a brutal political theater. His nose was sliced off. A red-hot iron seared his face. His tongue was partially removed, rendering him barely able to speak. In Byzantine culture, disfigurement wasn't just punishment, it meant you had lost God's favor. And if God had turned his face from you, so too must your people. This wasn't a deposition. It was an excommunication from humanity. Chapter 6, Exile in Cherson. The dead man breathes narration. Now maimed and disgraced, Justinian was exiled to Cherson in modern Crimea. But unlike most deposed rulers, he didn't fade into oblivion. He adapted. He wore a golden-nosed prosthetic reinforcing whispers that his mutilation was miraculously healing. He called it a divine sign. Commentary. It's like watching a political zombie slowly reanimate. He couldn't lead armies anymore, or so everyone thought, but his ambition burned hotter than ever. When Cherson's rulers considered handing him over to Leontius, Justinian fled. He found refuge with the Khazars, a Turkic tribe powerful enough to rival empires. There he married the Khan's sister Theodora, forging an unlikely alliance. Temporarily renouncing his Christian identity, he took on the customs of the steppes. It was survival, rebranding, and diplomacy all in one. Chapter 7, The Emperor Strikes Back. Narration. Leontius, now ruling Constantinople, heard of Justinian's survival and panicked. He sent emissaries with bribes, asking the Khazar Khan to deliver Justinian's head. But Theodora, now loyal wife and political ally, warned Justinian of the plot. He fled again, this time to Bulgaria. Real-life story. In a remarkable twist, he convinced the Bulgarian King Tervel to grant him an army. Think about this: a disfigured, exiled, semi-silent emperor with no throne, no power, no nose, manages to talk his way into commanding a foreign army. That's not just luck. That's charisma weaponized. Final scene of part 1. The return begins. Narration. In 705 AD, after 10 years in exile, Justinian launched his counterattack. Under cover of darkness, his troops entered Constantinople through an abandoned aqueduct. The current emperor, Tiberius III, had ousted Leontius years earlier. He tried to flee. It didn't work. Justinian's enemies would soon feel his wrath. But his return wasn't salvation. It was apocalypse in purple robes. Chapter 8. The Second Coming of Rhinotmetos. Narration. In a city that once mutilated him, Justinian returned not as a savior, but as a storm. The spectacle began immediately. The people had expected mercy, or at least diplomacy. Instead, they got medieval brutality turned up to 11. Real-life parallel. This was Stalin returning to power after exile, not to unite but to purge. Or Napoleon re-entering Paris, not as a man of peace but of ambition. But even they might have blinked at what Justinian had planned. Chapter 9. Justice or Vengeance. Narration. The retribution began with a parade of humiliation. Justinian had both Leontius and Tiberius III, his usurpers, captured and chained. In front of thousands at the hippodrome, he had them dragged like animals, placed beneath his feet in public, and forced to bow. Then, with no trial, no last words, he beheaded them both. And that was just the start. Insight to ancient Byzantine's vengeance wasn't just emotional. It was political. It sent a message. And Justinian's message was that he had returned to be feared, not forgiven. Chapter 10. The Massacres begin. Narration. Justinian didn't stop with the emperors. He started sweeping executions of nobles, generals, and even priests who had aligned with the previous regime. Many were publicly flogged before being burned alive or drowned in sacks, a particularly cruel Byzantine execution method. Real example, the family of a former general was thrown into the sea from a cliff. Witnesses say the emperor watched it happen over lunch, using his prosthetic nose to keep the wineglass steady. Commentary. This is a man whose trauma from betrayal and mutilation had metastasized into a reign of terror. But beneath the savagery, you see the psychology of a ruler desperate to erase the shame of exile. Chapter 11. The Golden Cage of the Palace. Narration. Inside the imperial palace, life turned into a paranoid fortress. Spies were everywhere. Servants who coughed near the emperor disappeared. His wife Theodora, once the woman who saved his life, was now isolated from political affairs. Historical analysis. This is common in tyrants' second reigns. Loyalty isn't rewarded, it's distrusted. Nero, Ivan the Terrible. Even North Korea's Kim family shows the same pattern. The closer you are, the more danger you're in. Justinian lived in fear, but unlike his first reign, now fear ruled everyone else. Chapter 12. Religion as Weapon Narration. Despite being married to a Khazar pagan and once renouncing Christianity, Justinian began weaponizing religion again. He now claimed divine authority had healed him and punished his enemies. He reinstituted laws against iconoclast heretics and rebanned pagan texts. Accusations of witchcraft, devil worship, and conspiracy flowed like wine. Story from a manuscript: a bishop in Thessaloniki was boiled alive after being accused of harboring anti-imperial monks. No trial, just a pyre lit in the town square. Justinian sent a note that read, "Only the fire cleanses what time cannot." Commentary: religion becomes a convenient cloak when political power begins to rot. It gives the illusion of righteousness to hide brutality. Justinian wore that cloak like armor. Chapter 13. The Cost of Cruelty. Narration. While Justinian hunted enemies at home, enemies outside the empire grew bolder. The Arabs advanced into Asia Minor. The Bulgars, once his allies, turned on him after he betrayed King Tervel. Reflection. In one of history's most ironic moves, Justinian invited King Tervel, the man who gave him back his throne, for peace talks. During the negotiations, he ordered an assassin to poison Tervel. It failed. Tervel escaped and began raiding Byzantine lands. Commentary. It's like biting the hand that fed you while it's still holding a sword. Justinian's paranoia not only burned bridges, it turned former friends into fatal enemies. Chapter 14. Diplomacy dies. Narration. Foreign ambassadors were now treated with suspicion. The Persian emissaries were kept waiting for weeks. Slavic leaders were summoned only to be arrested. One anecdote tells of a Roman envoy forced to walk barefoot through Constantinople as punishment for his pope's refusal to send a letter of loyalty. The empire became diplomatically isolated. Analysis. This is what scholars call imperial siege syndrome. The belief that the world is out to get you, so you isolate yourself further, which ironically increases the real threat. Chapter 15. The Final Betrayal. Narration. By 711 AD, the city was exhausted. The treasury was empty. Citizens whispered revolt again. The army, unpaid and demoralized, began defecting to rebel generals. One such general, Philippicus Bardanes, led a new revolt. The difference this time, even the palace guards refused to defend the emperor. Commentary. This wasn't just mutiny, it was abandonment. When your last line of defense opens the gates, the empire isn't being overthrown, it's dissolving. Chapter 16. The End of the Emperor. Narration. Justinian tried to flee through a secret tunnel beneath the palace. He didn't make it. He was captured, and this time there was no mutilation, no exile, no second chance. He was beheaded. His head was sent to Rome and other capitals as proof the tyrant was finally dead. Reflection. For a man who survived mutilation, betrayal, and exile, to fall quietly was almost anticlimactic. But it signaled something bigger. The Byzantine elite would never again allow a disfigured man to rule. Image and divinity were now fused forever. Chapter 17. The Horse Accusations. Narration. Years after Justinian's death, bizarre stories emerged. Chroniclers in rival courts began spreading vile rumors that the emperor had engaged in sexual acts with horses. Why horses? Why bestiality? Historical insight. In Byzantine culture, horses symbolized military authority, masculine beauty, and divine strength. To accuse a ruler of perverting that relationship was to symbolically reduce him to an animal. The story wasn't about literal truth, it was about legacy assassination. Examples of similar smear campaigns: Pope Formosis's corpse was exhumed and put on trial. Empress Theodora was accused of performing sexual acts with geese. English kings were accused of cannibalism by rivals. Commentary. The strategy was always the same: humiliate the dead to justify their removal. Make them monsters so that the victors look like heroes. Justinian's real crime was tyranny, but history decided to remember him as something far worse. Chapter 18. What Remains. Narration. To this day, Justinian the remains the only Byzantine emperor who returned to the throne after mutilation. That alone speaks to his resilience, charisma, and intelligence. But none of it mattered in the long term. His name became a cautionary tale, not for ambition, but for cruelty, paranoia, and legacy lost. Quote from a modern historian: Justinian II was a man who beat fate, but not himself. He escaped the blade only to die by the shadows he cast. Chapter 19, The Power of Symbols in Byzantium. Narration in modern politics, image is everything. In the Byzantine world, it was divine. An emperor's appearance wasn't just about beauty, it was seen as a reflection of God's favor. Commentary. A missing nose. That wasn't just grotesque, it was sacrilege. A sign that God had physically removed his blessing. Historical note. Byzantine law explicitly barred physically disfigured men from ruling. That's why cutting off Justinian's nose wasn't just punishment, it was political execution through cosmetic theology. Real-life echo. We see this today in regimes where leaders dye their hair, hide illness, or wear military uniforms despite never serving. The symbolism of health and strength remains critical to perceived legitimacy. Chapter 20, The Gold Nose, Defiance or Delusion. Narration. Justinian's golden prosthetic nose is more than a curiosity. It's a masterstroke of defiance. He turned a mark of humiliation into a badge of resilience. Analysis. This wasn't about vanity, it was psychological warfare. By replacing what was taken, he challenged the notion that mutilation had stripped him of divine authority. Symbolism gold, royalty, resilience, divinity, missing nose, mercy, shame, punishment, disfavor. Put together, it became a paradox that unsettled his enemies. Scholarly reflection. Some historians argue Justinian's return undermined centuries of imperial theology. If a mutilated man could rule, what other rules could be broken? Chapter 21, How Legends Are Made. Narration. History isn't written by the victors, it's rewritten by the survivors. After Justinian's death, chroniclers working for rival dynasties began crafting a tale so bizarre, so grotesque, that it permanently branded him in shame. The accusation he had sex with horses. Pause, reflect. Why not sorcery, murder, or poisoning? He had done all that already. Commentary. Because the myth needed to be more than evil, it needed to be animalistic. To dehumanize him in a way that no military failure or political betrayal ever could. Historical patterns. King Edward II was accused of being murdered with a red-hot poker through the anus, insinuating sexual deviance. Empress Theodora was rumored to have performed lewd acts with geese. Catherine the Great allegedly crushed by a horse during intercourse, another absurd lie. These were not coincidences. They were carefully manufactured myths designed to discredit powerful figures long after their fall. Chapter 22, The Horse Rumor, Explain Narration. Let's break down this specific accusation. Horses in Byzantine culture symbolize military power, cavalry, to elite. Nobility, only elites could afford them. Masculinity and control. So what does it mean to say a man had sexual relations with a horse? Symbolically, he lost control over power. He reversed the hierarchy, becoming subject to what should be his servant. He degraded his masculinity into animalistic desire. Historical insight. These rumors emerged in texts from rival dynasties decades later. No contemporary source from Justinian's reign makes the claim. It appears only after his death, precisely when it could do the most damage without scrutiny. Modern parallel. Think of modern politicians who are falsely accused of satanic rituals, pedophilia, or secret cults. The purpose is never truth. It's always moral disqualification. Chapter 23, History's Filthy Mirror Narration. The story of Justinian II shows how history can be a tool of character assassination long after the sword has done its work. Let's look at other rulers similarly slandered. Pope Formosus. His corpse was dug up, dressed in papal robes, and put on trial. Found guilty posthumously, his body was thrown into the Tiber. King Louis's funeral, rumored to bathe in virgin blood to cure disease, a proto-vampire myth used to justify revolutionary hatred. Emperor Nero, historically remembered as a madman who fiddled while Rome burned, though modern scholarship challenges most of it. Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake," but her vilification helped light the fuse of revolution. Commentary. The myths outlive the facts because they are more satisfying. Justinian didn't need to be accused of bestiality to be seen as monstrous. But that rumor gave the people a grotesque image they could carry through generations. Chapter 24, Survival versus Sanity. Narration after his return to the throne. Justinian II achieved something no one had done before or since he ruled again after being disqualified by mutilation. But at what cost? Reflection. He survived exile, humiliation, and betrayal. But he didn't survive himself. Psychological analysis. The trauma of betrayal turned into obsession. His need to punish, to dominate, to erase the shame became all-consuming. Even his own legacy wasn't safe from his paranoia. Historical quote, "Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals." Robert Caro. For Justinian, power revealed wounds that never healed, only festered. Chapter 25. The last emperor of his kind. Narration. Justinian's death in 711 marked the end of the Heraclean dynasty. The Byzantine throne would never again be held by a man so physically disfigured, so publicly despised, and yet so historically immortal. Legacy snapshot: first emperor mutilated and exiled. Then, first to return to the throne after being maimed. Ruled twice, died once, yet remembered forever. Even in Byzantine art, depictions of Justinian are rare, and when they appear, they often hide his nose or avoid portraying his disfigurement. His image was dangerous. Commentary. He became not a man, but a warning. Chapter 26. Modern myth-making. Narration. The defamation of Justinian II was no medieval fluke. It was the early version of cancel culture by narrative. Modern examples. Political enemies having fake scandals leaked to the press. Deepfakes created to discredit opponents. Social media mobs turning rumors into viral truths. Commentary. The medium has changed, but the method is the same. Degrade someone's image beyond repair. Not through facts, through narrative, through disgust, through fear. Justinian's horse myth wasn't an isolated lie. It was a weapon. Chapter 27. Could Justinian have been great? Narration. What if Justinian had not been mutilated, had not been betrayed? Could he have been another Justinian? I, the builder of the Hagia Sophia and the codifier of Roman law. Possibly, he had military talent, diplomatic skill, charisma enough to gain foreign armies, religious authority, a legacy of imperial blood. But all of that was drowned by paranoia, revenge, cruelty, isolation. Commentary. It's a lesson not just in history but in psychology. Trauma unprocessed doesn't fade. It metastasizes into cruelty often aimed outward. Chapter 28. Legacy stolen. Narration. Justinian II lost more than his face or throne. He lost the ability to write his own story. That power was seized by his enemies. And for centuries the lie prevailed. Only in recent decades have historians begun to untangle fact from fiction. Takeaway: history is not a courtroom. It's a stage. And the loudest playwright wins, unless we challenge it. Chapter 29. The Emperor and the Horse, a method exposed. Narration. So was Justinian II, truly the king who was exiled for having relations with a horse? Absolutely not. He was exiled for cruelty. He was exiled for betrayal. He was exiled for misrule. But he was remembered for the horse because shame is easier to digest than complexity. Quote to close: power may be temporary, but stories are forever. Chapter 30. Legacy as a casualty. Narration. When an emperor dies, his power ends, but his memory is only just beginning. For Justinian II, his death in 711 AD marked not the end of his story, but the beginning of a myth that would outlive the Byzantine Empire itself. Commentary. Legacy is the last kingdom an emperor can hope to rule. But Justinian's enemies denied him even that. They didn't just remove his head. They severed him from dignity, from truth, from any narrative that could inspire admiration. Think about that: a man who survived mutilation, exile, betrayal, and even death on the battlefield was finally undone by rumors scribbled on parchment decades later. That's the power of propaganda. Quiet, lasting, effective. Chapter 31. History is written by the offended. Narration. The chroniclers who smeared Justinian were not amateurs. They were monks' advisors and historians serving future emperors who wanted to validate their own claims. Painting Justinian as a monster made them look like saviors. Quote, in order to justify the present, the past must be twisted. Unknown Byzantine saying analysis. Accusing a rival of bestiality wasn't meant to uncover truth. It was theater. It was a narrative assassination, and it worked. Examples: Justinian was reduced to Rhinotmetos, the cut nose, as if that defined all he ever was. The story of the horse was so outrageous it stuck despite no contemporary evidence. His real achievements barely mentioned in most Byzantine chronicles post-800 AD. Lesson: history isn't always about who did what. It's about who controls the pen afterward. Chapter 32. What Justinian actually did. Let's pause the mythology. Let's look at the man behind the monstrosity. He won wars against the Slavs and Arabs in his youth. He reformed coinage and taxation. He convened the Quinisex Council to settle church disputes. He married a foreign princess and secured alliances. He accomplished the impossible, returning to the throne after mutilation. Now compare that to the final image history gives us: a sadist, a pervert, a failure. Why the contradiction? Because Justinian II was dangerous not just in life, but in memory. He proved the system wrong. He proved that divine image didn't have to equal divine right. That power could be retaken even after mutilation. That survival meant more than purity. To the Byzantine elite, that was an unforgivable heresy. Chapter 33. Modern Echoes. Narration. It's easy to dismiss Justinian's tale as medieval insanity, but the echoes of his story ring loud in modern politics, media, and warfare. Real-life modern parallels, media smears. We've seen entire careers ruined by rumors that didn't need to be true, just viral. Accusations without evidence. Headlines without follow-ups. Guilt by suggestion. Cultural propaganda, from Cold War leaflets to meme warfare on social media, reputation remains one of the easiest targets. Erasing context. Just like Justinian's achievements were buried under filth, modern figures often have their legacies rewritten post-fall. Statues torn down, books rewritten, speeches misquoted. It's not just history, it's identity warfare. Sexual allegations, still one of the most powerful weapons to destroy public trust. Whether real or fabricated, the stain often never fades. Commentary. Justinian's fate isn't medieval, it's cyclical. It happens every time power shifts, and narratives need new villains. Chapter 34. Power without compassion. Narration: was Justinian innocent? Absolutely not. He executed rivals without trial. He burned villages. He watched executions like theater. His paranoia turned friends into enemies and allies into corpses. So what is the lesson? It's this: power without compassion becomes tyranny. Tyranny without memory becomes myth, and myth unchecked becomes truth. Justinian's life teaches us that surviving power is not enough. You must survive how others tell your story. Reflection. In a world full of leaders who fear being forgotten, the greatest fear might not be oblivion, it might be misremembering. Chapter 35. The real tragedy. Narration. Justinian II was a man of staggering resilience. He came back from exile, rebuilt alliances, and reclaimed power in a way no other emperor ever had. But what makes his story tragic isn't just his downfall. It's how his redemption arc was hijacked by fiction. He had a second chance to rule wisely. He squandered it in blood. He had a second chance to restore dignity. He chose vengeance. And when he died, the world didn't thank him for surviving. They mocked him for how he looked. Then they shamed him for what he never did. The myth outlived the man. Final chapter. The emperor who lost his face and his history. Narration. In the end, Justinian II is more than a footnote in Byzantine history. He's a mirror that reflects how we treat power, punishment, and propaganda. He was exiled by fear, reborn by grit, destroyed by shame, and all of us centuries later are left asking if a man can lose everything: his throne, his nose, his name, and still rise again. Why did we remember him for the one thing he never did? Takeaway. The truth isn't always what survives. Sometimes the lie is more useful. Conclusion: what we learn. Don't trust the first draft of history. It's often written by those who benefited from the ending. Survival is not victory. Without compassion and reform, even a triumphant return becomes a cycle of destruction. Legacy is fragile. It takes a lifetime to build and a rumor to destroy. Narratives matter. They outlive rulers, outlast revolutions, and echo for centuries. So next time you hear a wild story about a fallen ruler, pause. Ask yourself not if it's true, but who needed it to be.